Well, I've spent most of my life traveling around the world searching after archaeological mysteries, lost cities, mysteries of the past, and living dinosaurs. So much of the work I do has to do with actual on-the-site investigations, plus a large part is delving into libraries and books and research. And I have a large book collection, so I do a lot of research like that. I like the idea of being an Indiana Jones kind of person, and it's a designation that I enjoy. Like Indiana Jones, I go out with a machete. I go into remote areas, often where people wouldn't normally go, and many archaeologists have never been, living with remote Indians in the jungles of the Amazon, or crossing the Gobi Desert, or going to sunken cities under the ocean. This is the kind of archaeology I enjoy. And I like reading about these things too. And therefore I write about them in my books on lost cities and the videos that we do and take readers there. I travel around the world to various sites, many of them remote, others well-known sites, often hacking my way through the jungle with a machete and my guides, or scuba diving to a sunken city that's never been discovered before. But otherwise, much of my research is done in libraries with books and researching the subjects that I'm after. My various researches have led me around the world to giant cities in the Kalahari or the jungles of South America, diving to sunken cities and remote islands in the Pacific, or even just going to certain Mediterranean islands or remote ruins in the high Himalayas, that kind of thing. And other researchers have led me as far afield as Australia, New Guinea, and even to many libraries around the world, in search of rare books and photos that may exist of unusual sites. I've always been interested in mysteries of the past and archaeology, history, also in the natural studies like dinosaurs and cryptozoology. And as a young man, I think cartoon shows like Johnny Quest, or reading about books by Ivan T. Sanderson or Colonel Fawcett, even simply National Geographic has got me interested in traveling around the world, going to unusual exotic locations, seeing for myself the many exciting ruins and archaeological spots that exist. And I began at an early age traveling around the world when I was only 19, starting in Asia, across India into Africa, and later to South America. I worked for oil companies, and I taught English and did odd jobs to earn my way around the world. And eventually I began writing the books that I write, which is my series called the Lost Cities series. As I began traveling around the world and looking into archaeological sites, I began to realize that there was more to the past than I'd been taught in high school and college. And the picture of the past that I began to create in my mind was quite a bit different than that was being taught in history books. The more I found out about the unusual mysteries of the past, the more curious and insatiable my quest became for the answers to those things. One thing led to another until finally I've come to the point where I've written my Lost Cities books, which give a radically different picture of the ancient past and what it was like than that we're typically taught today. I believe that in the past, the ancient civilizations were more sophisticated than we generally give them credit. The typical scenario, say, taught in high school is that 10,000 years ago, men were cavemen. They suddenly stepped out of their caves in Samaria and Egypt and began building giant pyramids and huge monuments, all within a short space of time. I feel that there needs to be a significant correction to the timeline history that we're taught of a straight line graph of caveman to modern man, because civilization is not this linear progression. It's a roller coaster of peaks and valleys, of ages of science and enlightenment and the sudden dark age and collapse of civilization. We know for a fact that this has happened many times in the past and may easily occur again in the near future. So therefore it is a different way of looking at the past, one of a roller coaster of history rather than a linear line. The question would be, how far back in time does our roller coaster of history go? I think that we can trace mankind and civilization back at least 50,000 years, if not quite a bit more. We have a considerable amount of evidence for this, including many anomalous artifacts found in geological strata that is clearly of great age, much greater than, say, 10,000 years. We know for a fact, too, that there are iron mines and other mines in Africa, as well as other continents, that go back to 45,000, 50,000 BC. When we add to this the great age of a number of ruins, gigantic ruins that can be found around the world, plus the additional use of ancient texts, such as from ancient India and Egyptian texts and the Greek texts, we come up with a view of the world that's radically different than that we're taught today. A world where people as intelligent as you and I are, just as we do today, building buildings, having commerce with their neighbors and other states, building large ships, and in general doing what civilized people do, which is creating a society which includes buildings and ports and that kind of thing. There's an amazing evidence, too, that in the past there has been quite a bit of geological change that has radically upset the balance of civilization. As an example, it's an archaeological fact that there are more than 200 known sunken cities in the Mediterranean alone. Now, we know that these cities weren't built underwater. Through geological time, port cities have submerged and large areas of land have gone underwater. And conversely, there are other port cities, such as Ur in ancient Babylon or Lothal in the Gujarat Peninsula of India, which are now miles from the ocean, yet had originally been built 5,000 years ago as a port city. From the various sunken cities we found around the world, the ancient and astonishing megalithic remains that can be found in various areas, often in the middle of the desert, sometimes underwater, we can surmise that in the past, some very advanced civilizations who built on a grand scale existed in the past, and it's clear that they were destroyed, possibly through a series of wars, but also clearly through some geological upheavals as well. The destruction of ancient civilizations and the creation of these lost cities seems to often happen because of geological change. There's wide evidence of cataclysms and just disasters of climatic and geological that seem to occur over and over again. This too, these disasters and cataclysms tend to throw off much of the geological dating that is accepted today. For instance, it's often said that the dinosaurs became extinct 65 million years ago. You might ask, well, is this a scientific fact? The truth is, this is not a scientific fact. This is a theory, a scientific theory, and one based on the uniformitarian dating of geological strata, and thereby assigning the strata with many millions of years of age between the strata. Well, something that I might want to point out, too, that maybe leads into this, is that the dating of many civilizations is in serious error, mainly because they're much older than usually we say. Okay. I mean, like Inca stuff in South America, Mayan stuff is like that. Even they're constantly, I mean, this is traditional archaeology, constantly pushing back the dates of everything, you know, and we have this tendency to just make everything, you know, closer to us in civilization. Okay. But yeah, there is a controversy in dating, and a lot of people don't understand the nuances of dating. Like they'll say, well, of course they've carbon-14 dated these fossils or something. I mean, things are, you know, totally impossible. Like, as you said, you know, nothing can be carbon dated that's older than like 30,000 years old, really. And even that's kind of tricky. I mean, that kind of thing, you know. The dating of many ancient cultures is inexact and is controversial. Many ancient cultures are apparently much older than originally dated. Archaeologists are continually pushing back the dates of civilization. We see this in Central America with Mayan structures. We see this in South America. We even see this in Egypt and in India and the Middle East. Also in China and Southeast Asia. Constantly pushing back these ages. I think that there is evidence that man has lived with dinosaurs. And in the same vein that dinosaurs have lived with man. That man and dinosaurs have cohabited on this planet, even in the recent future, there is a considerable amount of evidence for. First of all, as evidence for dinosaurs and man living together, we have the tremendous amount of written material and verbal legends. The story of dragons, for instance, is an interesting one, and one that clearly seems to relate to dinosaurs. Giant sea monsters, lake monsters, which could be a type of dinosaur, even the story of flying dragons, as in Chinese, Mayan mythology, also the mythology of the Middle East, of griffins, and other sort of flying lizard monsters. These clearly relate to dinosaurs, and we know for a fact that at least at one point in the past, such animals did exist. Now, it might be worth asking ourselves, well, are the legends of dinosaurs and flying dragons and monsters like that, is it possible that they had just seen fossils and therefore concocted legends to go with what were the fossilized remains of these animals, or, as the legend seems to say, did man actually live at the same time as dinosaurs and interact with them? Typically in a scene of slaying a dragon or a monster. It is possible that dinosaurs, many varieties of dinosaurs that are thought extinct, are still alive today. There is a branch of zoology which is known as cryptozoology. Crypto meaning hidden, zoology, animals. The study of hidden animals. This is a legitimate area of zoology and intrigues many zoologists, including myself. Cryptozoologists then search the world for these hidden animals. It can be as varied as large animals believed to exist in the Loch Ness Lake of Scotland and the Loch Ness Monster. I think that dinosaurs do still exist today. And the idea of extinct animals not being extinct, but have carried down remote areas of the world today, is not only a credible theory, but one that is gaining in popularity. Dinosaurs could easily be alive in many areas of the world. For instance, in 1977, a Japanese fishing boat off New Zealand brought up out of the water the carcass of what appeared to be a plesiosaur, an animal that should have been extinct for millions of years. And yet, they had it on board the ship, it was photographed, scientists on board the ship monitored and studied it, and then, unfortunately, they threw it back into the water because they were afraid that it would contaminate the catch of tuna that they had. Well, why don't people see dinosaurs today, you might ask? That's a good question. The answer to that is they do. Dinosaurs are reported around the world all the time. And certain animals like the coelacanth, which was also said to be extinct hundreds of millions of years ago. We've now at least 5 or 6 species have been captured off the Straits of Madagascar. Other species, as the tuatara and giant crocodiles and other huge lizards and tortoises, all are from this same era of time, and they've come down to us today. So therefore, the idea of seeing dinosaurs in different places in the world, well, people are. Now, a lot of the people who see these things aren't carrying a Nikon camera with them everywhere they go. And clearly, dinosaurs are not living in, the farms and fields of mid-America, say. They're living in remote areas of the world, typically jungle swamps that are nearly impenetrable. A good example of this would be the Lake Tele region of the Congo, where a brontosaurus animal, known to the natives as the Makili Mbembe, is said to live in this swampy lake area. And a number of zoologists have gone to this remote area. There are photos taken of the Makili Mbembe on the lake. And the natives, too, have very rich traditions of what this animal is. Walt Disney, in fact, even did a fictionalized movie based on these expeditions called Baby, which was all about the capturing of a live brontosaurus in the swamps and jungles of Central Africa. There are reports from all over the world of pterodactyls, of some kind of giant flying lizards flying. A particularly intriguing series of reports on pterodactyls comes from the southwest African nation of Namibia. In Namibia, there have been various reports of pterodactyls flying in the remote desert regions there, including a story of a pterodactyl attacking a young shepherd boy who was tending the flock in an area near the Kalahari Desert. This reported sighting of a pterodactyl was also investigated by the famous South African zoologist Courtney Latimer, who is famous in the coelacanth case of first identifying the coelacanth. She herself believed that indeed pterodactyls were alive in this remote corner of Africa. If you go into the remote deserts of Namibia, you will encounter people who claim sightings of pterodactyls and have seen them. And in fact, in certain areas of Namibia, there is a terrific fear at dusk of the natives of these giant flying lizards which eat sheep and attack people. There are many fascinating reports from around the world of living pterodactyls. One of the reports, and a series of them, comes from some credible sources, which I trust, that pterodactyls have been sighted in certain areas of the Namib Desert of Namibia in southwest Africa. These people cite native legends and actual witness reports and film footage even of pterodactyls flying in a remote rocky desert area where there are these outcrops of cliffs and rocks where pterodactyls can live. This is an extremely remote area of a remote country, a place where really no one lives, and a few natives in rare little spots, and you have a few German sheep farmers on vast desert tracts. And they themselves tell stories of pterodactyls and know where they live. We find this in many areas of Africa, particularly remote mountain and desert areas where there are cliffs, areas where pterodactyls could live and survive. And though it sounds incredible, the evidence for this is growing and growing, and until soon it will be either proven one way or another. In the 1930s, also in Africa, in the swamps of northern Zambia, a British game warden wrote a book called In Which Bound Africa. And one of the chapters in this book is about an animal, a flying pterodactyl-type lizard called the Kongamato. And the Kongamato was a pterodactyl that lived in these swamps, the Oundi swamps of northern Zambia. And curiously, anyway, this is a chapter in his book from 1934. There are many stories of pterodactyls also in North America and in South America, as well as in Indonesia and other areas like that. In the early 1970s, there was a pterodactyl flap, if you will, that took place around Brownsville, Texas, where a number of people, and we had here multiple sightings, including school teachers and policemen, of what they described as giant flying lizards, pterodactyls, flying in the daytime even, which is unusual for pterodactyls because they tend to be apparently a nocturnal type of animal. And these pterodactyls flying along the Rio Grande. Apparently, if these are authentic sightings, these pterodactyls are coming from the Sierra Madre and Sierra Oriental mountain ranges of northern Mexico. There's a famous story of a photograph in Arizona of a pterodactyl shot in the late 1800s that was nailed to the side of a barn. A number of cryptozoologists have claimed they have seen this photo, including Ivan T. Sanderson and the columnist John Keel for Fate magazine. However, we cannot locate this photo now, and we can't really be sure that it really ever existed. There's another curious story that actually takes place in Illinois, near to St. Louis, of a cliff over the river Mississippi, which the Indians, the Illini Indians in that area, according to legend, said a giant bird, like a pterodactyl, lived in this cliff, and that this giant flying lizard actually was eating people. So one day, according to the legend, the bravest brave of the tribe got his friends together, and he went to where this pterodactyl lived on the cliffs, and he used himself as bait to try and kill this monster. And when the pterodactyl attacked him, his friends who were in hiding jumped up, and they riddled this pterodactyl with arrows and killed the monster, which the Indians today call the piazza. And even today, on this cliff in southern Illinois, is a giant painted mural of this giant killer bird, which the Indians had killed earlier. Even today, this can be seen. So we can see that there's really quite a bit of evidence to show that dinosaurs are still alive today, that man has interacted with these amazing creatures, even in recent history. And if we continue to search for these animals, we may one day actually prove that dinosaurs are still alive. Dr. Cabrera's ecostones are a very interesting subject, I think, and there's something to that, I believe. I think that his stones may well be authentic, and as you know, they show apparently humans and dinosaurs interacting together. At first glance, it seems impossible, and therefore this has led to accusations that it's an elaborate hoax. But I believe that the Dr. Cabrera collection could be authentic. However, I think that some of the conclusions that Dr. Cabrera draws may be erroneous. Now, on first glance, looking at stones that would have dinosaurs and humans on them interacting, by normal geological dating, these stones, if authentic, would have to be 65 million years old. Now, I believe this is what Dr. Cabrera is in the opinion of, too. He thinks that he's got stones, and because they show dinosaurs on them, these stones are 65 million years old. Yet, it's not necessarily the case. It can actually be that the geological dating that we're using today to date strata into the common periods of time, Jurassic, Permian, all the different eras and epochs, may be completely wrong. Furthermore, we have to look into the whole concept of fossils and fossilization itself and extinction. What is it that creates a fossil? Are fossils normal events, or are fossils indicative of some anomaly, a catastrophe, as you will? I would say, and many scientists will agree with me, a fossil is an anonymous artifact. It is the result of some cataclysm, some catastrophe. Wherever there are fossils and fossilized animals and plants, we have evidence of some cataclysm, of a tidal wave, of a volcanic eruption and destruction. My point is that when animals die in a natural setting, they do not become fossils. A good example of this would be in the early 1800s, Buffalo Bill and his buddies went out into the Great Plains of America and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of buffalo, cut their tongues out and left them on the Great Plains to rot and die. Oh, they're already dead. What happened to those buffalo? Did any of those buffalo ever become a fossil? No. Not one will ever be a fossil. And that is because when things die, they decay and go to dust. And when you bury a dog in your backyard, he's not going to become a fossil either. What it takes to have a fossil, whether it's a dinosaur fossil or a petrified wood or anything like this, we've got to have some cataclysmic event that has not only killed that animal, but buried it under tons of gravel or volcanic ash or dirt in some landslide. Footprints of dinosaurs is even more incredible. If you're going to have some dinosaur, and wow, imagine even the cases of dinosaur footprints and human footprints together. Okay, a dinosaur and the human are walking along the mud of some riverbank. Well, that mud and everything in it would have to be preserved almost immediately after those footprints were made. And that's not a normal thing of the riverbank just drying up and, during some drought. I mean, a volcanic eruption or some landslide would have had to preserve that instantly. So now we get back to the subject of geological dating and 65 million years for dinosaurs. Even the mystery of the extinction, the so-called extinction of dinosaurs. What has created that? One point I would like to make is that the very mechanism that causes and creates fossils is the same mechanism that causes the extinction of these animals. And that is cataclysmic changes, tidal waves, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Marine fossils are even more difficult to explain without the use of cataclysms. If a plesiosaur or a coelacanth or any kind of fish suddenly dies and floats to the bottom of a lake or an ocean or a river and lies in the silt, is it going to normally become a fossil? No, again not. It will decay, it will just go back to the gene pool of nature. So as we look at fossils, we start to see that they themselves are indicative of these cataclysms of the past. And now we can also begin to look at geological dating in a different way. One of the reasons for this would be that fossils then and the geological strata that we find them are simply assumed to have accumulated over millions and millions of years. The kind of geology we're taught today is a geology called uniformitarian geology. And this is the school of geology which tells us that geological change is very slow. It happens over millions of years. We can see the kind of changes. And therefore, when we have layers of strata, we then create a period of time that's vast in scope, covering millions and millions of years. Yet the same strata in the opposing theory of geology, which is called cataclysmic geology, that same strata can build up not over millions of years, but in just a few years, or even in a matter of days. For instance, in a tidal wave or landslide situation, a layer of gravel, clay, or material can accumulate not over millions of years, but in a matter of hours. So therefore, when we now have our ravine in North Dakota with its various strata layers, if we assume, well, this strata here would have taken 1 million years to accumulate, this strata another 1 million years, and so on, and now we pull a dinosaur bone out of one of the layers of strata, we then say, this is 65 million years old. But yet, in cataclysmic geology, that strata, rather being dated in millions of years, could be dated possibly by only thousands of years. It is quite possible that man and dinosaurs lived together, but not necessarily 65 million years ago in the past, but in a more recent time. And the solution to this would be, to explain it, is that in geological time and the periods we have, these are based on what's known as uniformitarian geology, and a kind of geology that assumes extremely slow, steady rate of geological change and stratification. However, in the opposing theory of geology, which is called cataclysmic geology, we have geological change happening in a much faster period of time, with cataclysms and stratification occurring not over millions of years, but just in a matter of days. If cataclysmic geology is a more correct view of the way our planet works geologically, what we would then have is a tremendous compression of the periods of time that are talked about with dinosaurs, where suddenly 65 million years of stratification is compressed into just maybe 2 million years or something like that. And so therefore, dinosaur fossils that are said to be 65 million years old, and this is a date that's totally arbitrary, there's no carbon dating or any other sort of scientific so-called dating with these fossils, but merely the date associated with them is where they're found in the strata. There's no exact scientific way of dating the fossils of dinosaurs. There's no scientific meter that suddenly points to 65,000 or 65 million years, or any date. The dating of fossils right now, say at 65 million years old, is something that comes from the stratification of the layers of geology. There's no exact meter that's pointing to a date 65 million years old. Rather, it's guesswork based on uniformitarian geology, the geological theory that says that stratification and layers of Earth come slowly over millions and millions of years. Yet, in the opposite theory of cataclysmic geology, we now have an explanation for the stratification of the Earth, which happens in a much more rapid period of time. And if that is a more correct view of the geological activity of the Earth, we would then see this 65 million years of geological time compressed into a much shorter period of time, and therefore fossils that are said to be 65 million years old would not be 65 million years old, but much, much more recent than that. The Acambaro collection, found in Mexico in the 30s and 40s and excavated in the 50s, is an amazing subject. Here we have clay figurines, apparently pre-Columbian, dated as about 4,000 years old, which show, again, dinosaurs and prehistoric animals with humans interacting in unusual ways. And apparently these are authentic. And I think there really is something to the Acambaro collection, and this is something that has been largely ignored by the scientific community, simply because it's so incredible it can't be true. Yet even the University of Mexico has authenticated this collection. Now the dating, again, is very crucial to the Acambaro collection, because here we have ceramic artifacts that can be dated by known scientific methods. And rather than being recent hoaxes made in the last 50 years for some unknown purpose, I mean, they have proven that these are ancient ceramic pieces. And yet they show the impossible, which is dinosaurs. Now, if we relate the Acambaro collection with the stones of Dr. Cabrera in Ica, Peru, we have an interesting paradox in that both are showing dinosaurs and humans interacting, yet Dr. Cabrera is claiming that his rocks are, of course, 65 million years old, because that's when dinosaurs became extinct. While controversy in Mexico, the Acambaro collection, we have similar evidence of dinosaurs and people together, yet it's clear that the Acambaro figurines are not 65 million years old, but rather 6,000 years old, give or take 1,000 years or so. I think that this is a more correct system of dating, and this fits into the cataclysmic theories which I believe in, which is that the geological change and even the dating of these fossils is from a more recent time than ours and doesn't go back the 65 million years. The Acambaro collection in Mexico is fascinating and just as interesting as Dr. Cabrera's Ica stones in Peru. We have with Acambaro figurines made out of ceramics which can be dated by a known scientific process. And the dating for these is something like 6,000 years before present, making the Acambaro figurines astonishing in the sense that they show dinosaurs and people together, yet it's from a time point that's manageable to us, 4,000 years BC. Now, if we contrast this with the Dr. Cabrera's Ica stones, which he believes are 65 million years old, simply because that's when dinosaurs are said to have become extinct, we find that the Acambaro collection is actually lending credibility to the Ica stones. Yet, it's clear that the Acambaro stones are not 65 million years old. And I think that this is more the correct dating of these artifacts, and that most probably the stones of Ica are also from about the same time period, say 4 to 5 to 6,000 years ago. Perhaps the solution to the paradox of dinosaurs and men being together can be explained by the Acambaro collection and the Ica collection, and the cataclysmic dating and a change in the whole geological scale, where we see that what's causing extinctions is these cataclysms. It's also creating the fossils. The geological time scale is compressed, and therefore amazing discoveries such as the figurines at Acambaro can be authentic. The dating absolutely correct on them, and dinosaurs did in fact come down right to that period in time. And similarly, Dr. Cabrera's stones in Ica would be authentic as well, but not 65 million years old, but more along the same dating as the Acambaro collection, 6,000 to 7,000 years old. I think that one of the solutions to the paradox of dinosaurs and people together and the vast discrepancy in time, the whole timeline of millions of years versus only thousands of years, can be explained in a cataclysmically geological view of the past, where rather than geological events taking place over millions of years, they take place more quickly, and what is a million years on a geological time scale is in fact only, say, 1,000 years. And therefore it's going to bring all this dating much closer to us and make it possible so that in a scientific way man and dinosaurs can have existed together in the past, and in fact dinosaurs can still be alive today in small numbers in remote areas of the world.